think thank you, Nicole, for putting the recording on. I see we have a quorum. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. This is the December 4th meeting of the Town Subcommittee of the Expenditure and Revenue Study Committee. And I welcome all the other folks, especially from the town, who've taken out their time to join us this morning as well. In terms of our agenda for today, our first, we need someone to take the minutes. I think that Janet, maybe it's John's turn. I'm not sure. Did he?
John, I've done it 3 times.
I'll do it.
John, if you're able to, Nicole will send you the AI summary.
Yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay, John, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so next item is to review and approve with any necessary discussion of the minutes from 2 meetings on November 6th, which I think I redid together with Ruth Ellen, and then November 20th. I've read through both of them. Are there any questions from any members of the subcommittee about the minutes? Hearing no questions or discussion about the minutes, is there a motion to approve? We can do them as a group, the November 6th and November 20th subcommittee meeting minutes.
So move.
A second?
Second.
Second,
John
okay.
and I are speaking in unison today.
There you go, great. So, John, how do you vote on that?
Yes.
Janet?
Yes.
And I don't see Ruth Ellen on the call, so I vote yes as well. And we'll move on. Thank you for those. Next item on the agenda is to schedule the upcoming meetings. I put in the agenda that I would propose the next 2 Thursdays, since that seems to be a time that's been working for us. Any discussion on that for 12/11 and 12/18 at 9 a.m.?
Just doing a quick recheck of my calendar, and no, that's fine. So I have, the 11th and the 18th at 9.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, the following one is a holiday, federal holiday, so we wouldn't meet that day anyway, on the 25th. So okay,
Merry
so
Christmas.
yes, so let's plan officially then, Nicole, for December 11th at 9 a.m. and December 18th at 9 a.m. I'm assuming that both will be required. If for some reason they're not required because of other activities we're working on the overall ERSC, then we can always cancel them if required. Okay, if nothing else thank you for your flexibility on the schedule, John and Janet. We'll let Ruth Ellen know as well. Hopefully the town staff will be able to join us at that time as well. Okay, number one, there are 2 items that I had in the discussion before we get to any new business. And first was we didn't get a chance to talk about Janet's request for charts and data to support the work we're doing, and we wondered if we could get some updates on that. I just want just to right before that, I didn't put it in the agenda. I did want to thank Nicole and I think Charlie Young, if he was involved as well, in redoing the categorization and presentation of the data for ERSC on the main page for everyone. That's something we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now, or more. And I did see that on the homepage for ERSC, we now have everything going back to even our town sub meetings back to the last meeting of 11/20. They're not linked, but at least the meeting, the agenda, the meeting materials, the stuff's there. Some of them even have meeting recording links. So it looks like it's sort of all there, and it's up to date as far as the last meetings. Actually, last meeting of the full committee was November 13th. The agenda is there, meeting recordings there. I did notice, Nicole, that October 6th, I guess I could share my screen. It's for those of you that didn't see it. Let me share my screen really quickly here. Here we go. So yeah, you should see the screen. So this is, yes, you should see my screen right now. So this is the ERSC main page on brooklinema.gov. And what has been added now are the main Expenditure and Revenue Committee meetings and materials. clickable agenda recordings and different files. There's a duplicate here on 10.6, which I'm sure will get addressed. And then it goes back to all the after you go back through all the presentations. This is extremely helpful, by the way, Nicole. And then the town subcommittee meetings of ours, and then the school subcommittee meetings and future subcommittee meetings. This is exactly what we were looking for. So kudos. Thanks very much. Really appreciate that.
Second that thought. It was really very helpful not to have to go searching.
Correct. Yeah, this is really a model for maybe how, if other committees aren't doing this, this is like so smart to do and easy to update after each of the meetings, takes time, but I'm saying once you've got the framework, that's really good. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and we're back to Janet, your update on your request. Maybe
Okay, so I met with Melissa and her staff and separately with Anne. Anne sent me a couple of things. I don't believe you got them distributed yesterday, Anne. And Charlie and I were talking before the meeting. They seem to have something else to do, something about a retreat and a select board. I don't know why that should take precedence. So they have not been as focused, but we should get information from them shortly, I believe. And as I looked at what Anne put together, of course, that makes me think of other ways to look at it. So it's a work in progress, but we've started the ball rolling. So I'm very satisfied.
All right, and just for the benefit of the public, maybe, can you just explain what you're looking for?
Oh, okay. We're trying to come up with a way to show to the public how we got where we are today. And that also we're being good stewards, the town schools are being good stewards of tax money, and why what we've had just isn't working. So it includes salary information, how much have salaries gone up? It will include a look at how much taxes have gone up and what's been driven by overrides versus debt exclusions. What has been added to the town side through town meeting things that didn't used to be, what things don't exist anymore that did used to be, and we're using as our starting point, I believe 2019, because the pandemic in 2020 upended and changed everything. So we were on a much more sustainable trajectory, I believe, before we had that huge drop in revenue, and we're just starting to get back to where we were before. So any questions from anyone?
Folks should have received an email from me last night around 8 o'clock
Okay, I haven't
with
checked that.
attachments,
I'll check to that. Thank you. 8 o'clock.
but I also put them in the OneDrive.
Oh, I saw something from December 3rd. Yeah, that's yesterday. Yeah, okay.
Time flies.
Yeah, that is yesterday. Thank you, Ann. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Janet. I think that'll integrate nicely with the next item as well. The second item on the agenda was to go over some sort of some structure I tried to put around the kinds of things we need to have in our report. This is by no means final, and by no means it's totally subject to complete change. But what I was doing before Thanksgiving was thinking about what are the key questions that we need to be addressing on the town side, and in theory, in parallel with schools, and what types of subject matter do we need to cover in our report in order to inform the public as to, again, like Janet said, how we got to where we are, and displaying what we're gonna, what will happen, what has generated the need potentially for raising additional funds, and what will happen if we don't. So let me share the document. It was put in the agenda packet a couple of days ago, so it should have been available for people to look at. It's a combination, I guess full disclosure, it's a combination of a whole bunch of questions and thoughts I had that I then fed into Gemini, and it's just for organization and flow. And I thought it did a pretty good job as I then edited it again. But I'm saying it did a pretty good job of taking all the ideas and scrambled thoughts I had and sort of reorganizing and categorizing everything. So it was pretty good. Let me, unless someone who looked at it from our committee, you know, looked at it earlier, has specific comments. I was just going to sort of go through the high level of it and then get some feedback from anyone actually on the call about this. So the first one was that part of our you should be able to see my screen already. Yeah. So part of the reason that we're meeting is because there's a potential to ask for an override. So what is that need? And so there were four areas in which I thought we might want to be covering this. And this, I think, begins to integrate well with what Janet was talking about in terms of how do we get here. The one is we always talk about a structural deficit, that basically we're not, you know, each year we're not creating enough revenue to cover our expenses. And so we're getting behind. And so if and when we come up with an override amount, so what is the exact amount of the deficit the override is going to fix, and how long has it been growing? What are its primary components? One of the things we've heard about from Melissa, as well as Susan Givens on the school side, is the cost of health insurance, which I think Melissa had told us is in the double-digit increase in terms of where we are. So this is obviously outpacing our revenue streams. Increases in contracts. You know, negotiations are starting now with the union for the teachers. First meeting was yesterday, and I know at school committee tonight we're meeting to talk about union negotiations with some of the other service unions that support the schools, and then mandated school funding, things that just have to be done. So these are just examples, but I think the more clarity we can bring about how we're getting behind. You know, the other side of that is, are we spending what money we have as wisely as we can? So that gets to funding allocation. If we get additional funds, where will they go? You know, if the schools are looking for an increase above a level service budget, where will those funds go? We know that from the meeting with DPW, from the presentation by DPW, that they've taken hits. We're looking at, of course, from data that Charlie Young shared with us over the last couple of meetings on the fire department and the police department. So public safety is another area, and then in general, town government. So is this money going to fund new services? And if so, what are they? Or will it simply be maintaining what we have currently, just to basically like stay afloat? We've talked about level of service. So what specific cuts to services and staffing will be made immediately if the override fails? And it should be very detailed. I think Chaz has given us some information about that. And the more specificity we can give so people understand what will happen if it does not pass. If it's a menu-driven override that we've talked about, then maybe you know, each one has its, if we pass this stays, if we don't, this goes. And then just so people understand within the town what the comparison of a potential override would be to a debt exclusion. The difference between, you know, a permanent increase and a temporary increase for capital projects. So that's sort of the first area of sort of informational for people. The second is, since we're the town subcommittee, so what cost saving measures have we already implemented to reduce the need for the override? So again, Chaz had provided some information, but you know, we're getting to the point now, it's middle, you know, well, early December, where we've got to start putting text and content around the things that we've learned, whether it's from Chaz's team or whether it's from, you know, Ruthelle and Janet, John and I, and working together with other town staffers. We've got to start putting the paragraphs together that actually explain these things. The next is use of one-time funds. Have we been using free cash or ARPA? And if so, when is that going to be exhausted? And what will happen? So we've already, this is one of the ideas, you know, one of the fragments of a phrase I had in mind that that the tool picked up on. And there's this common refrain from people in town about, well, the town's sitting on a lot of free cash. So I think, and we understand in the subcommittee here, and probably all the people that are tuned in right now, that free cash isn't just a pot that's sitting there ready to be spent. And I think to the extent that we can explain in clear layman's terms of what free cash is, why it needs to be at the level it is as a percent, I mean, Melissa has explained it. So I don't need to redefine it. We know what it is, but it's important that we explain to people that, you know, there are limitations to what we can do with one-time funds or with the exhaustion of, say, ARPA. There may be constraints that are not going to be placed on our budget. We have done a lot of work on benchmarking, and from that point of view, I'm not sure in thinking about this, and I'd like to have a conversation about it. How important it's going to be to residents in general to say, you know, compare us to Cambridge, compare us to Belmont, compare us to Arlington. We're in our own, like, you know, challenge right now. I'm not going to say a mess, but we're in our own challenge. And to the extent that we have to solve the pit we're in right now, you know, no one's coming from another town to give us money. So understanding how we compare is nice to know, I think. But I asked the question, and you know, maybe it's a little challenging. I mean, to people, is this really relevant? Like benchmarking us to other towns, unless there's some solutions and how they've addressed it that we can utilize or leverage. I'm not sure that this is like the big picture we want to show people about how we compare to Cambridge or how we compare to Bedford or Belmont or something like that. Anyways, in any case, that's a, you know, I know we've done some work in that area at the big ERSC level. I think we should include it, but I don't think it gets to the core of supporting potentially, you know, having to ask for an override. The other one is, like, you know, our financial health. Maybe Lincoln can help us with this, of course. What's the status of our reserve funds? What will be the impact if the override fails? And then taxpayer impact. So that's, again, what do we think the annual property tax increase is going to be? You know, assessments just happened. There was the meeting recently about new property tax values. How can we figure out what's going to happen to us, for example? And how long will it work? Will this override be for, you know, 2 years, 3 years, 15 years? What's going to happen so that people understand? I think we've had 5 of these. I think in discussion with John the other day. So, or I think Paul Saner's report that we got said there were 5 of these. So what's going to happen next? And then what do we do for vulnerable populations? So, you know, if we get higher tax bills, the town needs to be able to clearly articulate how we're going to support vulnerable populations. And then I had, which is 1, 2, I think 3 areas. Yeah, that was it. Yeah, there were 3 other areas that I sort of talked about in here. One is, you know, where will the money go and what will be lost if we don't have it? So these get to sort of the Janet questions of a detail both for the town as well as for schools of where we are in terms of override funding, where will it go, and what will it solve? Will it be salary? Will it be programs? Will it be maintenance? That will be repair? What's going to happen there? So we want to be able to articulate a clear plan for that. We talked about the possibility of a menu of cuts, a menu of budget reductions. What are the exact services? What are, again, not by name, but staff positions that might have to be reduced if it fails. I did determine by a little bit of searching that in Franklin and Mansfield, both of which passed overrides in the last year or 2 or 3, they did use this list to demonstrate why, if you what will happen in terms of maintaining a level service budget if the override failed. New services and level service, again, we need to articulate what is this for? Is the override just to stay above our structural deficit for a couple of years and basically maintaining the status quo? Or are people might ask, you know, is this going to get us new services? I don't know, let's say K-5 world language restoration, you know, one thing that comes to mind, or as a new service, or are we going to expand things? And what will the cost be? What will the benefit be? Again, Medford, for example, again, in some research I did, had a 2-question override. One was on stabilization of the budget for a certain number of years, and the other was to expand programs at the schools. We talked earlier about taxpayer impact and future planning. So this is direct impact. Like, can you tell me as an owner, what will my tax bill look like? There was an example I found in Milton here that I included in here. There was a very clear breakdown for both average and median single family homes on what the tax bill will look like. What about a stabilization fund for future? to extend the period between overrides? What's our financial forecast in terms of a long-term strategy? We certainly have the right people here on the call that can help us with that. And then there's work going on, obviously, in other parts of our commissions and boards on commercial impact in businesses. What will be, first of all, what will be is our growth that we can talk to that's real, so that people will see where that revenue could come in from. And secondly, what impact will this have on our businesses? So what will be the impact on sort of vitality of local businesses if tax rates go up for business and commercial properties? And then I had a list of 6 sort of questions off the top of my, not off the top of my head, but that I wanted to articulate here. These might be similar, Janet. I didn't do a side-by-side to what you had suggested, what you had asked for, but for, at a high level for people, what does the town budget look like for next year with no additional funding? What does the budget look like with the funds being reallocated, meaning some programs may are reduced or eliminated? Again, we've talked about this in general, and Chaz gave some presentations about it, but we need to get to the details and flesh this out with real paragraphs, sentences and paragraphs. How much money will we need to maintain the current level of service? Is it sort of a direct question. What do we need to fund additional growth, and in which areas? What about any agreements on the town school partnership? What will that do to the town budget? Let's say the schools, if level service for the schools is, I don't know, I'll just throw out a number. It's, we're at 142 million for FY26. If it goes to level service at 147, let's say $5 million or something, whatever. And the town school partnership decides that the school will get more money to cover that. Again, that's just a number I took off the top of my head. They may be asking for more or for less, but we may find out tonight at the school committee meeting if they're ready. So at least that's the plan. So if they're asking for 5 million and the town school partnership agrees to assist them with that, and that takes some funding out of the town side, so what are the impacts there? And then we don't know now, but what can we expect? For union negotiations, but over the time that we're doing this, to write this report with this or a similar framework, there are negotiations going on. What will that do to the overall budget? Because the school budget is part of, really, in a sense, the town budget. So these were ideas I came up with. The paragraph kind or bullets seem to me to be logical breaks or logical pieces, and take as almost little separate items to fill out. Perhaps in the discussion now, we'll figure out, yes, do we want to follow this, or do we have another way to slice this? Does it make sense to have, people had a couple of days to look at this, but if we need a little time for people to digest it and then come back with, well, I think I'd like to work on this or that, we could do that. I hesitate to just sort of throw this over the wall to Chaz and say, hey, will you and your team just do all this? Potentially you have all the information, but that's a big lift. To what extent can we in the town subcommittee assist with that, or take some of these on our own? So that's sort of the idea I had. I wanted to share with the committee, and I'm open the floor for discussion about this.
Jesse, hi, John here, if I may. It's a great list. You've done a great piece of work there, by the way. And I think that's really helped lay things out. And I'm glad that you started, kicked off your list with structural deficit. And here's my couple of points around that. I'm not exactly sure what a structural deficit is. And when you say what is the exact amount of the structural budget deficit, that suggests that we know what it is. And therefore, there should be a graph in my mind of showing over the course of time, maybe the last 10 years, what this structural deficit is, how it's been growing or not, as the case may be. Because I'm not sure what the definition of it actually is. I've heard it mentioned many times, but I've never seen a chart with it in. And I don't know exactly, frankly, what it is. I can sort of guess at it, but I think that we should come to some kind of consensus. Either it's a technical term and it's easily defined, or it's something that we use in our sort of discussions and we throw around, but haven't put any figures to it. And I'm a kind of numbers-driven kind of person. So I would like to see us And I like the words exact amount. That suggests that we've defined it, we've measured it, and we know whether it's increasing, decreasing, etc.
Okay, we got Chaz has his hand raised and Janet. I honestly didn't know who raised their hand first, but maybe you
Chaz
wanted
did.
to. Chaz did, so go
Yes.
for it, Chaz.
Thanks,
And
Jesse.
then- Sure, of course.
And thank you for this. This is very helpful. And I think it does follow the general structure of an override report. The big questions. I think we just have to be mindful of a couple things. One, there's some talk in here about the schools and the Tesco partnership and so forth. I do think as this subcommittee does its work, you just have to be mindful that you've got those two other subcommittees out there that are working on those issues. So, focusing our efforts here on the kind of town and municipal operations side of things is going to be helpful.
Of course.
Historically here, what's happened is both because it's important in terms of how it's drafted and how it's then disseminated out to the community. The process has always been that staff provide the support, we provide all the data, we provide whatever is needed to the committees, and then committee members write the actual sections of the report. I think it's also very helpful then because then community members know who to come and talk to, and then the report writers in writing the report generate, develop that firsthand expertise in the areas that they're focused on, so that as when the committee publishes a final report, if someone comes to a member and says, hey, I have questions about X, you say, well, why committee member wrote this, so you can talk to that person. So
Sure.
it's important to make sure that the committee has that buy-in in terms of the drafting of it. With that said, we're always happy to look at drafts. We're always happy, we can provide information, whatever support you need. But we do think it's important that the report is generated from members of the community, and that then those folks are available to answer those questions from the community when they arise. And then in terms of John's question, which I also think is a good one, when we talk about structural deficit, and you'll see this at the forecast meeting, and I strongly encourage folks, if you've got time, we'll publish the agenda tomorrow. It's going to be on Tuesday during the day, but you'll see the kind of schedule for that. I think right now it's set for the morning of Tuesday. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. I'm homesick with I'm home with a sick toddler, so I have to juggle many things here. So when you look at that forecast, you're going to see the discussion of the structural deficit, and what the structural deficit is. Oh, and just your screen is still up. You might want to.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's okay.
Thank you.
I'm talking right now. Can you give me 1 second, please? So when we talk about the structural deficit, we talk about if we were to do the same thing that we're currently doing now, if we're to do all the same things that we're currently doing, what is the cost of that, and then what is the gap between how our revenues cover that and the growth in expenses? And what you'll see, as you'll see in every other Massachusetts community, is that growth in expenses is primarily healthcare. You will actually see, as we discuss this on Tuesday, basically almost the entire growth in our revenue for FY27 is going to be taken up by the growth in healthcare costs. And then you have every other thing that also goes up, as a natural, that not just healthcare, but for example, wages go up. We are obligated under collective bargaining agreements. We've got other costs that go up, for example, technology and other sort of fixed costs that increase naturally. And that's what generates our structural deficit. So it's Sebastian, it's the delta between, what you can, what revenue we can put together, and the costs, those increasing costs. So when we say structural deficit, that's what we're talking about. It's the gap between continuing to do what we do and the revenue that we have available to us.
Right. So so John, I think we can capture that, that text that Chaz has shared with us, and utilize that when we write out what a structural deficit really is. Let's let Janet continue while Chaz is speaking with Sebastian there.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the reason. Part of why we keep having a deficit is we keep spending more than we earn. I think I would add in here the concrete drivers such as the healthcare costs, because it's totally beyond our control. And I think that the voters need to decide how long we want to keep doing this, how much is within our control, and we should stop just adding, and how much is beyond our control. Jumping down in your outline to the area of benchmarking, I think the one place we can't not benchmark is salaries, because that's the one place where we're in competition with our peers. So when we do union negotiations, both sides are bringing in that information. When it comes to police and fire, if they go to arbitration, they're armed with, you're paying us down here and everyone else around us is up here. So even if it's not an item for negotiation, it's a reality of how do we get staff if everybody is paying more than we do. So that's an important place to benchmark. But I agree with you in the other areas. I really don't care what level of service they have in Newton. Am I getting what I need here? I think is a more relevant question. And I'm willing to try to take a stab at writing both the structural deficit piece and the debt exclusion versus override piece, because I think I have a pretty good grip on those from both my own budgeting experience and my experience on advisory.
Great. Okay, that's wonderful. So the minute will reflect that. Thank you. Any other discussion about any of the items in this?
Sean has his hand up.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Yeah, I think I froze there a second ago. Yeah, Jesse, you asked the question, was it relevant to compare ourselves with other towns, citizen towns? I think it's very important, and I'll tell you why. Basically, it's not that we're not in Newton, and obviously what Newton spends on the fire department, for example, is a guide as to where are we in the pack. We've got our hopefully our list of comparable towns, maybe it's Lexington, Newton, whatever, and we can see how they deal with their basic services, for sure, like fire, for example. Are they doing a better job with their money? And if so, why? I think it would help us, and if we're doing a better job, then great. Then that's something that we don't have to worry about so much. But I think it also, from the point of view of the override, the voters will want to know, are we spending our money wisely? And I think that comparing with other citizen towns is one of the ways, probably an important way, that we need to look at. So I do think it's very important. I come back to the structural deficit issue. And I've raised this point before, and I know it has an answer, it has a technological answer, but the graph optics don't look great. And that is, if you look at the budget book, you can see the free cash over the course of time, last 10 years, and it's risen from, I don't have it in front of me right now, but it's something like 10 million to $20 million. And there's a detail, I think Charlie gave, or Melissa gave a detailed discussion as to why that is. There's ARPA's involved in that. Is that sort of comparable with the growth of our budget, et cetera, et cetera. The fact of the matter is, we got to incorporate that graph, and we've got to defend it in a way. If it's ARPA, then it's ARPA, and then we can show with or without ARPA. I mean, there are ways of conveying that, because as Jesse has already stated, there are many people in town that think we have tons of money, and where's the structural deficit, since every year we basically balance the budget. So where is this famed structural deficit? I've been asked. People are skeptical. They don't understand the niceties of one-time money versus continue. I mean, they just look at a graph. Go, wait a minute, we got $20 million last year, $24 million this year forecast, and maybe the forecast for the 26s or 27 is zero. I don't know. I think that certainly the ARPA issue was raised by Melissa and Charlie. But it's our issue, and we've got to explain that to the voters. How come? And that's all part of the structural deficit discussion, which I think is important, because if we can, the voters will be looking at this and saying, are they really doing a good job, and is the town really doing a good job at spending our dollars? Do they really need this, or is it in fact just an accounting mechanism, and we're just throwing more money into the free cash pot at the end of the day, and which obviously gets spent on good projects? There's no question, I think, about that. But nonetheless, I think that we've got in an environment of a hugely increasing costs. I mean, let's take a look at a couple of things in the news. We got a 13% increase in gas utility costs, going just hit my bill. Don't know, it's just hit your bill, and everybody's bill, because we're all here in Massachusetts. Electricity's gone through the roof. Supermarket cost of eggs, we hear that pretty much, not so much in the last couple of weeks, but certainly it's a familiar refrain. Healthcare costs, of course, everybody's suffering from those, and that in Congress is grappling with the ACA and whether there's going to be a vote, et cetera, et cetera. So we are in a background of our constituents are faced with major cost increases across the board outside of town real estate taxes. And I think that this, we've got to come forward with a pretty good case as to why we need to do it now, and how much do we need to do it, which is obviously what this committee is looking at. But I think that we need to spend some time on this free cash discussion, and maybe there's education involved in it, because it's a little sophisticated. But nonetheless, there must be a simple way of projecting this, and it's all, to me, it's all wrapped up in this idea of the structural deficit. So if there is one, let's see it on a graph, and let's see what it's composed of, and let's see it going up and down, and what are the factors that are causing it presumably to go up, because that's why we're asking it to be covered. We don't like it, or we can't operate without it. Anyway, thank you.
Any other comments before we move on to figure out what we're going to do next on this?
I'm still not sure, other than salaries, how we benchmark. So would it be percentage of budget? Because it can't be dollars. Our budgets are all different sizes, and other communities have other sources of revenue that don't present themselves to us. They can grow faster than we can. They have more commercial. They can put it on someone, not the taxpayer. So I think if we're going to discuss that, we need to flesh out exactly what we would benchmark, and what's important. Yeah, there's it's hard to unpack it, because once you say one thing, it leads into everything else, and it's all interrelated. In my mind, I don't care if you call it structural or not, the deficit is because we're spending more than we take in. It becomes structural because we're limited in what we can take in, and we're limited in what costs we can control. Everything is salaries, 90% of the budget, 85% of the budget.
Right.
So we can't determine that unilaterally. It's negotiated, and that's where benchmarking, in my mind, really matters, because we have to stay competitive with the market. If we don't get staff. And we lived through that kind of period where it was very difficult to attract people. So I will take all of this and cogitate on it and see if I can start to draft just some ideas, or at least put some flesh on Jesse's outline. And if I don't remember, because it's not in front of me and my brain doesn't work anymore, if other parts of his first section, I think when I looked at them, were more dependent on actually committing to, this is how we're going to allocate new funds, and we're not ready to do that yet, which is why I just picked out the two pieces that I think are just informational and discussion. But yeah, I never have understood why people find budgets to be so mystifying, because everybody does it in their own personal life. And yet when they translate that of, I have to live within my means, from my own personal budget to what a town can do, what the government can do, what a anyone can do, it becomes this, oh my God, I don't understand it kind of issue, but maybe that's just my background speaking up.
Well, Janet, I was going to suggest that maybe one way we could, as a town, a subcommittee, could do the preface or introduction to our report would be to start with like a very big picture of, this is the total amount of money in, total amount of money out, and then start to cascade or waterfall it down so that people, and then, we can rely on Charlie, Chaz, and others, Melissa, of course, Lincoln, to get the tables that we need, but at least in text, we can start together, soon, as in tomorrow, next week, to begin to put a deeper framework around starting at a big picture for people and then taking them through it. It's not like, based on, we're all regular people, okay, so I mean, a regular discussion, people should be able to follow. And so if we take people along from the biggest picture of, income and expenses, or revenue and expenses, and then sort of just break it down in a meaningful way, I think we'll get a clear picture that people will understand. So,
sorry, I mean to interrupt you. I just want to say, I think not just revenue and expenses, but why it's important to have something left over, which we call free cash, which is
sure,
maybe bringing that discussion up into it. All of the basics that Melissa goes through so well in the budget book, because that's the part that people don't understand. They see the big number for close to $400 million. Why can't we just do X, Y, and Z? And it would be helpful to know how little of that every year is actually available. We get, I'm going to throw out a number. We have we have $20 million more this year to spend, but 18 million of that is committed to health insurance and raises that have been promised and everything else. So the amount available is only this amount. And then we get the list of new things. I think it would be very important for this committee to put out to the voters at large. You need to decide if you want that maintenance of effort budget going forward, or if you're always going to want to look for the new thing. Because if you're always going to want to look for the new thing, unless you're willing to say, I'm going to let something else go, you're asking for overrides well into the future.
So I think a reasoned and data-driven segment on structural deficit, within the budget, and another one on free cash are definitely two we need to bring forward, because it's a town-related thing, not schools. I'm 100% on board with you, and I think we all are. Perhaps then outside of this meeting, Janet, either, again, because of open meeting law thing, either I can meet with you separately, or you and John can meet, or John and I can meet, two out of the four of us, to get some text around that, and then see where we can get. I think if we can write the text up either together or individually, and then present that to Chaz, Charlie, Melissa, to put the data in there, like a chart or a table that they have really good access to and are able to pull together quickly. That could be powerful in terms of us.
All right, well,
okay.
I'm willing to take a stab at least putting a draft together, and then we can see your schedule, my schedule, John's schedule, how we want to bring that forward.
Yeah, that's fine. That's totally fine. I have sent a copy of this question thing, just in case, the question document, to Sadaf and Sergio, with a invitation to them to offer to meet to discuss their parts that might work in there as well. Okay, good.
Well, one thing I was just thinking, if I may, Jesse, if I just coming back to something Janet said, and that was that, Janet, I believe you said that our revenues are not matched with our expenditures. There's an excess. When you look at the budget, however, the budget is inherently balanced. Every year it has been balanced because we're required by law to do that. So this is the challenge I think that we have, that it's a projection that we're dealing with, not the actual. This year's budget is balanced. It will be balanced, and if it's not, we have to balance it. But arguably that is the structural deficit. But I can't remember a time when we've done that. So we have a balanced budget. So I think what it might say, what it does suggest to me, that if we look back over time at previous overrides, and we've got a number of them, I think, and see the effect, the cumulative effect of those, and whether they have met the estimates, because we're dealing with estimates, and I think that the voters, the residents, the voters are going to be wondering, are those estimates accurate? What's our track record on estimating? It comes up from time to time. This has been, in budget discussions, but I think that to show that we're pretty good at estimating, and would, I think, help, whether it's by example or whatever. I don't know what it looks like on the page, but I think something that says our estimates are good estimates, and we can stand by them. And this is why, because historically, this is our track record. And now it may be complicated, it may not be, but I think that we need to think about this, because it's a bit of a conundrum. We're asking for money, and yet the voter in the streets is going to say, "Well, you don't need it. You balance your budget. You got all this free cash. You don't need any more money." So I think that we need to think of those comments in mind as we go forward and draft and draw graphs, etc.
Thank you, John. That's very helpful. Chaz, look like you have a comment there, so please go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just want to follow up on John's comment because I do think that's really important. You're right, right. At the end of the day, we can't go into debt, right? We can't go into deficit. We cannot deficit spend. We must live within our means, whether we like it or not. And so in many ways that explains some of the free cash things. That explains, why do we have free cash at the end of the day? It's because we can't miss in the opposite direction. That doesn't work. You have to budget conservatively, and then you have to have a policy in place for what happens in the event that either your expenses come in below where you thought they were going to come in, or your revenues come in above where you thought they were going to come in. And there's a state policy about that says your free cash should be around between 5 and 7% of your prior year's revenue. We meet that. So I think that narrative about why is your free cash gone up, John, is a good one to talk about, because our budget has gone up, and now $20 million is within that 5 to 7% of our total revenues. And so, but then that other question about, how do you make it work? How do you make it work when every year you say, oh, here's our projection and we're going to come up short? And the answer is we cut things. We've cut things for the last 2 years, even with an override, because the costs of things like healthcare and collective bargaining have, unbalanced our budget. And that's, it's tough. It's a tough situation to be in. But, the example that I give most often is IT. IT says every year to us when we go through our budget meetings, the cost of our software licenses is going up on average around 12%. So I need 12%. Fung says I need 12% more in my software budget. And we look at that and we say, you can have 5%. Got some licenses. And that's what she does. She's got to make it work. And that means that her team, which is an excellent team, has to do more with less. Now, the fact that the town hasn't fallen apart because we've made those cuts, some people will say, well, great, you're living within your means. But I think if you ask the IT department, they would say they're under a huge amount of stress, and that's not going away. That's going to be exacerbated with the loss of ARPA funds, because the ARPA funds are currently funding our Zoom licenses. So when you look at that, the fact that we've done a good job, keeping the lights on and papering over the cracks that have come up as a result of us needing to make these cuts, doesn't mean that those cuts haven't had a negative impact on our operations. They have. And I look to at the police department, right? We have 6 positions that we're holding open, where we're keeping vacant, and the chief has said, that leads to unintended knock-on consequences. That leads to increased overtime. That leads to forced overtime for our most junior officers, and that leads to burnout. It's not ideal. It's not what we want. We've had to do it to make ends meet. The fact that we haven't had a catastrophe in terms of public safety is great. It speaks to the incredible work that the chief and her command staff and the whole team there do. But, is it the way we want to be running these things? No, it is very much, like I said, papering over the cracks. And so I think having people know that just because at the end of the day we come into balance doesn't mean that we are operating ideally. In a lot of ways, we are operating, in sort of a jerry-rigged situation.
Those are great points, Chaz. I'm
Jesse,
trying to
if
put
if
the
you wouldn't
record.
mind, I just want to add a couple things to what Chaz
Yeah,
said.
of course. Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So Charlie, I'm Assistant Town Administrator for Finance. So the definition, by the way, of structural deficit, the technical term, John, is just when revenues are projected to rise faster or slower than your expenditures, right? And we put a chart in the forecast every year that shows the line where the 2.5% we can add to the levy is not keeping up with the 14% increases in group health that are basically impacting 90% of your budget, right? Your personnel. So and the other thing I want to note is that's what the structural deficit is. So if you have a deficit, that's one thing. That's when your current year you don't have enough money, right? Structural deficit is future years. So the other thing I just want to note is, our projections do go out several years, right? But FY27 is coming up on July 1st. It's just 6 months away. So it's not as much a projection as you would think. We've effectively built the budget as it needs to be to provide the current level of services that the town provides right now, and said the amount of revenue we can raise by law and how much we think we can crank up revenues all over the place is not enough to fund that. That's what we're saying when we're saying we have a $3 million deficit in FY27. We're saying in order to do what you're doing now, you'd have to cut $3 million, right? And so, in order to realize the savings you're seeing, right, or folks are seeing on the street, the sort of free cash turnbacks we get from some departments. So, we always come into balance, right? And we always have some money left over. In order to realize that, we'd have to assume that we're going to get that savings the next year, right? And then you wouldn't have a CIP because that money goes into the CIP. So you're creating a cliff in the CIP, and you're just sort of doing what Chaz said, dangerously assuming that you'll just magically come into balance, right? So we can't do that. We have to estimate the expenses where they're going to be, and we have to be realistic about revenues. We can't estimate those, in a way that would be improprietous as well. And so that's why we can't just magically wave a wand and say the $3 million deficit is gone. This is what it costs to run the town 6 months from now. We're not talking about years out projections. We know what salary increases and steps and utility costs are going to be next year. They're not guesses at this point. So there's just a couple of things I wanted to make, points I wanted to make from the staff perspective.
Very valuable as always, Charlie. Thank you. Any other discussion about the questions? I think our next steps in terms of our committee will be to have some offline discussions in very small groups to discuss some of these elements and try to get a handle on this before our next meeting. That's at least my plan. Any other discussion about that? I did. Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. I mean, it's not really new business, but related to ERSE in general. And Chaz, I'm going to ask a question, but if now is not the right time, totally okay with that. I wondered if you could shed some light on this Kennedy School of Government poll situation, and in light of when the data that, I mean, in some people's minds at least, I mean, you're familiar with what's been going on, this swirl around this publicly, when the full ERSE will have a chance to sort of be updated on this. I mean, if it was done out of sequence, okay, it's a learning lesson learned. But so if you're comfortable sharing some information about that now, that would be helpful. If it'll wait till our next meeting, the only issue there is we don't have one scheduled for the full ERSE. So that sort of puts that initiative a little bit maybe on ice temporarily. So it might help us to understand what's happening.
Sure. So that poll is out in the field now, and I will say I understand people's concerns with that, and I think we have definitely learned a lesson here in terms of communication and messaging about what it is, the limits of its methodology, the value that it has, and all of the other things that are important. I think responses that I've gotten that have been concerned about it for a number of reasons have said, well, there's the possibility that the response rate is being tainted by, going out and recruiting for people to answer it. There's the concern that it doesn't ask the right questions. There are a lot of concerns that have been raised, and I understand and I've heard from the community on this, and it's important, I think, for us to acknowledge that. But it's also important to note that we can. This is data that we can take for what it's worth, and look at in conjunction with data that we have elsewhere, particularly from the community survey that was conducted 18 months ago, which is fresh and followed a random sampling model that doesn't have the issues that people have raised in terms of how this model works. We're going to try and schedule a full committee meeting before the winter holidays here. We're going to try and before the end of the calendar year. And we can definitely have that on for discussion at that juncture. We will also have some of the other data that we've asked the students to compile that is not related to this poll. I think in particular, we've asked them to cover things when talking about comparable communities, about how our fire department has worked in terms of injuries on duty and the issues suffered there. So we will have more information there, and we'll be able to discuss that with the full committee before the end of the calendar year.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Janet. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask how you picked who would get the poll. I learned about it from Paul Warren's email.
Yeah.
I took the poll yesterday, was surprised because I took it, I submitted it, and then I said, there was nothing on it about the schools. At least I don't remember there being anything about the schools, but
Right.
they have been a big part of all of our overrides and the subject that I have raised repeatedly. Seniors need something on paper and pencil. So is there a quick answer you can give me so that when I see other seniors, I have an answer because they're going to ask me, they already have.
In response to the school issue, the schools weren't able to really participate in the development of this poll. And one of the things that we said at the end of it was, look, do you like schools? Yes or no? We didn't want to speak for the schools in terms of programs and priorities that they had. So rather than say, do you want more money to go to the school system? Yes or no? Because that's such a broad question. And I think people would, if that was on there, I think people would accuse us of being kind of, well, do I want the schools to succeed? Yes, but do I want them to spend the money on X programming? No. So when confronted with that, we kind of had to make the decision to say, well, we're on the town side. We can focus on town services. Those questions about school services are going to have to be answered by the schools themselves. And through discussions with this committee. The question about can this be taken pen and paper, we talked to the vendor about this, we talked to the students about this. The way the solution that we came up with was, while we can't do it on pen and paper, you can take it over the phone. And that means, and you don't need a cell phone. You can take it via calling in and do it with a landline. So while you can't do pen and paper because of how the survey is structured, you can take it without a computer. And that was the most important part of it for us.
I haven't had a chance to do the poll yet, Chaz, but I guess my question is, if the questions do not relate to the school and do relate to the town, I guess my sort of direct question is, why didn't the town subcommittee have a chance to take a look at this, maybe a student presentation to us or something prior to this whole thing getting launched? Was there some kind of a schedule emergency that basically bypassed the town subcommittee on this?
And I apologize, but yes, basically what happened was, by the time this committee got up and running, the project was basically set. And so I wasn't able to, by the time this committee really got into its work, I wasn't able to, if we were to come back to you before this launched and, put the questions out there and so forth, I think we would have the students would have run out of time. And again, this is what we talk about with the limitations of things. They are on an academic calendar schedule. They have to get this done in time to submit, not just to us, but internally to the university to finish their semester and so forth. So I do apologize for that, but there just wasn't enough time.
Are the
And Chaz-
questions available? Just one quick question, John. Are the questions available to the public outside of taking the survey?
Yes, they should be public. They should be public knowledge. So I can circulate them to the team here.
You can send it to our
Yes,
team. It would be able.
Absolutely.
My first question was, how did they choose how to notify people about the poll? Because as I said, had I not gotten an email from Paul Warren, I would not have signed up.
Yeah, and I think this is the big crux of this, and this is the conversation we had with them, which was they didn't want to go out and solicit directly through, organizations because of the issues that people have raised. I think Paul did a service to us by, sending that out, but it also then has the knock-on impact of people saying, well, now you're just going to get the opinions of his listserv as opposed to a broader cross-section. The polling company itself tried to do outreach, and trying to get people, in the methods that it had, but it did not succeed in getting enough to make a statistically significant sample. So what the town did was we messaged the town administrator's newsletter listserv and said, so we thought that would be a good cross-representative sample. And then Paul also sent that message out, I think, trying to be helpful. To be fair, absolutely, it got responses and so forth.
Sure.
And with the demographic information we're collecting, that information the poll can be weighted and analyzed in that fashion. So even though you may have an oversampling of a certain cross-section of the community, you can control for that when you ultimately look at the data. You can weight the data. And so there is the opportunity to at least control for that. But with that said, even a weighted sample with a large number of people from that, that subset is going to reflect that subset. And so it's going to be, we're going to, we're going to take the data for what it's worth, and we're going to look at it in contrast to all the other data that we've gone out for in the community in the last 2 years.
I'm on your listserv, Chaz. I get your newsletter. I did not get notification of the poll from that listserv, so you might want to take another look. This is not meant to be critical, but if it's something we're doing going forward, how you reach people, it's been a problem for me ever since I've been involved in any way with town government, is how do you reach out to that mass of folks, 90% of whom never vote unless their money's on the line?
We'll say in addition to that outreach, we posted material about this at the senior center in particular, because we knew that was a hard to reach
Thank
community.
you. I appreciate that. I haven't been there in a while, so that's helpful.
Is there a plan to do a similar poll on the school side?
We have no plans at this juncture, but we could certainly, if the full committee thinks that would be helpful, and if the school department thinks it would, if the school committee thinks it would be helpful, we're happy to make that connection with Flash Vote or another organization that does similar sort of snap polling, and we can have that discussion.
All right, well, we'll look forward to getting in the interest of time here, I'd like to, and you probably need to get Sebastian is next. I don't know, but we hope he gets better soon. So the list of questions would be helpful to send out to our subcommittee. Or they'll end up getting posted on the website, actually, along with the other meeting materials. That would be, Nicole could do that. We'll be meeting in very tiny groups to get some content around the items that we discussed today in the questions document. I shared it with Sadaf and Sergio. I'll follow up with them on that. And we'll, plan to meet a week from today at 9 a.m. Any other new business from anyone? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And somewhere between the two of you, I'm sure you'll second it, and then we can do is it unanimous that we'll adjourn now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thanks everyone for your time, and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Same to you, Jesse.